Some of you may remember a movie called Something About Mary. And I think that title probably could be the whole homily today, that there's something very special about Mary. Some of you know I studied to be a Presbyterian minister and went to a Presbyterian church college. And I was in a theology class. It was surprising this came up at a Presbyterian church, but one of the professor asked, he said, so what is the assumption of Mary? And one of the rather snarky members of my group said, well, that's the assumption by the Catholic Church that God resurrected Mary. Well, first of all, Mary wasn't resurrected. We know that. I'm going to wait till somebody stops blowing a horn. Is that an alarm? Somebody's alarm. Okay. I'll keep going. That's not yours, is it? At any rate, that's the assumption by the Catholic Church that Mary was taken bodily into heaven. Well, she was taken into bodily heaven, but my friend said resurrected, and that's not at all true. But we have to ask ourselves, what is so special, and why do we reverence some people? You know, a lot of people think because the assumption was made official in 1950, that somehow that's when we started doing this, that it came around in 1950. But actually, reverencing special people goes back to 155. Not 1955, but 155. A man by the name of Polycarp, some of you know who St. Polycarp is, he was a disciple of John. So he's one person away from the apostles. And after he died, actually he was executed, martyred. After he died, his disciples took his bones and placed them in a very reverent place and would worship with his bones in the same tombs, because at the time Christians were being persecuted, so they hid in the catacombs. From there we get the tradition of putting relics in our altar. And in case you didn't know it, all of our altars have relics in them from usually the saint who is named for that church. So there would be a relic from St. Bernadette in our altar. And that tradition went on. That comes from all the way from the disciples' disciples. That's not something that the Catholic Church made up in 1950. So it's important to kind of understand that. But setting that aside, what about Mary? Nothing happens until Mary says yes. Nothing happens until Mary says yes. Till the angel says, we want you to do this. And it's that yes that brings all the rest of it, that brings Christ into being, to opens her up to that. And she is there throughout the rest of the scriptures. Now, bear in mind that after the archangel says to her, good, fine, this is how this is going to happen, he leaves. Nobody ever comes back to Mary. Nobody puts a little money in an account and said, here's a card. Right? She's on her own. And yet she is there every step of the way, even when the disciples themselves are not. She's there, obviously, for the birth. She's there for the first miracle, right? It's her that Jesus says, or she says to Jesus, they ran out of wine. They need help. And he even turns to her and says, woman, it's not my time yet. They need wine. Go fix it. Even Jesus responds to Mary. We hear the stories about your mother and brothers are outside. And she's there at the foot of the cross. From beginning to end, Mary is there throughout the Gospels. Now, there are some people that say, well, the fact that she was assumed, there's no record in the scriptures of Mary being assumed. There's no record of that. Well, my brothers and sisters, there's no record of a resurrection. Is there a story about the actual resurrection in the Bible? No. We have an empty tomb and his visitations. The same thing with Mary. Mary had a tomb in Jerusalem. There's still a place for it in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. They didn't find her either. But we still have to go back to Mary and what is so special about her. And what is special about her is that she is there from beginning to end. And she continues to be there for us. That's why we always go to Mary, right? Sometimes to ask her help. We don't pray to Mary. We ask Mary to intercede for us. She's not the one who answers the prayers. Jesus is. Christ is. God is. There's a famous story, and I'll leave you with this, about a man that got to the pearly gates, and Peter looked at his record, and he goes, I don't think so. But he goes and checks with God anyway, and God looks at the guy's record, and he goes, I don't think so. So Peter goes back and tells him no. A few hours later, God sees this guy strolling down the streets of heaven. And he goes to Peter and he says, Peter, I thought we decided we weren't going to let this guy in. Peter looks at him and says, don't talk to me. Your mother let him in through the kitchen door. My brothers and sisters, Mary's our kitchen door. Mary's that woman that reminds us always to look to Christ in those times of need, but to also be there with Christ throughout our lives. Amen.